Guys, if anybody's in here, let me know if you can hear me. Guys, if anybody's in here, let me know if you can hear me. I don't see anybody in here though, so I guess I'll just wait. Oh wait, I'm gonna have to lower the volume on this. I don't see anybody in here. Okay, test, test, test. I think it works. So I'm gonna wait until somebody shows up. If anybody shows up, we're gonna talk a little bit about the Australian Open. We're gonna talk finding a new racket. Okay, there's some people in here. It works. Okay, you guys can hear me. All right. So I haven't been live in a couple of years. Last time was, I think, in 2022. So I'm going to go live more. But I want to give you some thoughts about the Australian Open, things that I didn't share in the videos. I wrote something in my pinned comment on my last video. I shouted out the junior boys champion, super exciting player with a one-handed backhand, Henry Burnett. Wears on clothes, plays a Wilson racket. Started playing tennis in Basel at the same club as Roger Federer. So that was exciting. Townsend and Siniako won the women's doubles. Taylor Townsend is so talented. That's her second Grand Slam title. Very disappointing to not see any people in the stands for the men's doubles. I think right now, men's doubles is suffering from the fact that there are no superstar teams like the Bryan brothers, just one example of many. And the fact that pretty much none of the top singles players take doubles seriously, and that wasn't the case in the past. You know, John McEnroe is the perfect example. He won 78 tournaments in doubles, 77 tournaments in singles. I was actually mad that McEnroe came back and won the San Jose tournament with Jonas Björkman well after he was retired, because when he retired, he had 77 singles tournament wins and 77 doubles tournament wins, and 77 is my favorite number, and John McEnroe is one of my favorite players. And he came back and he ended up winning that tournament with Jonas Björkman. But in any case, doubles is in a deep crisis. There's no buzz around doubles, and they got to make some changes. They got to somehow entice singles players to participate in doubles, but I quite frankly don't see that happening. And the one thing I wanted to point out, something that I didn't mention in the videos, is that for the second time in a row, we had a more exciting WTA final compared to the ATP final. Remember, at the US Open, it was Sinner and Fritz. It was a fun match for me to watch. I thought that this was a very interesting matchup, but a lot of people were disappointed with this one. And the Pegula Sabalenka match was a lot tighter. It was 7-5, 7-5, if I remember correctly. And it was a more up and down match. It was more entertaining. And this year, similarly, Madison Keys against Sabalenka was incredibly exciting. Maybe the best tournament of the match, quite frankly. Super high level of play. I thought that Keys against Swiatek in the semis was also incredible. High level of play, especially in the third set. And you compare the Keys versus Sabalenka match to, you know, Sinner against Zverev, you could make the argument that the women's final was more entertaining now, 2 slams in a row. So it's just circumstantial. I think the story of Zverev looking for his first Grand Slam title is entertaining. It's interesting to watch. But I think the internet would have exploded if Djokovic would have played Sinner in the final. I think tennis Twitter would have been an absolute war zone, because that matchup is a super interesting one. In my opinion, Djokovic and Alcaraz, they seem a little bit friendlier than Djokovic and Sinner. I think, of course, Djokovic respects Sinner, Sinner respects Djokovic, but This is just from observing them from far away. It seems that Djokovic seems to be a little bit closer with Alcaraz compared to Sinner. And also on top of that, Djokovic plays Alcaraz a lot better in recent times compared to Sinner. He beat Alcaraz 2 times in a row, and he's lost to Sinner in that Davis Cup match in 2023 after having had 3 match points. Then he lost to him in Australia. That was a tough loss in the semis. Then he lost to him in Shanghai, straight sets. And he also lost to him in the Six Kings Slam, if I remember correctly, even though that wasn't an official match. So to me, that's a very intriguing matchup. And before the tournament started, I didn't pick Novak to go through Alcaraz. I did not know how Novak was going to play, but I think he surprised us all. He played unbelievably well for 37 years old. So I think he's still capable of doing a lot of damage in Grand Slam tournaments. And of course, that hamstring tear is going to heal. And this year is going to be super interesting with Zverev, Sinner, Alcaraz, Djokovic, maybe some of these other guys knocking on the door. I think it's going to be a fun season. So let's see what happens. Let me take a look at the chat and see if you guys are asking anything interesting. What do you think of Novak having to post his MRI so people quit accusing him of faking? I wish he didn't do it. I understand why he did it, but part of me wishes he didn't have to do that. It's sad somehow. You know, that's a pretty defamatory thing to accuse somebody of faking an injury. It didn't make any sense at the French Open when people accused him of faking an injury and then he had surgery. And people were saying that he didn't have surgery because he came back so fast. Maybe this guy is just very healthy and takes care of his body and recovers faster than other players. But of course, there was another example of Taylor Fritz coming back 2 weeks later to Wimbledon. So it wasn't anything out of the ordinary for me. And in the match against Alcaraz, it didn't make sense to me that he would fake an injury at that moment in time if he was faking injuries, which he's absolutely not. But why would he do it at the French where he was up? And why would he do it at that stage of the match against Alcaraz? It didn't make any sense. And like I said, it's a very defamatory thing to accuse somebody of psyching the opponent out by faking an injury. That's a pretty awful thing to do. And yeah, I think it's sad that Novak has to put the MRI up on Twitter, you know, to prove that he was injured. It's somehow sad to me. And of course, that's not enough for the trolls. You put the MRI of your injury up there and they're still going to doubt you. They're still going to say it's fake, you know, so you can't win. So for that reason, I wish that he didn't do that. Let me see what else. Will Zverev using a better psychologist help? That's tough. That's a really tough question. Look, as I said in my final analysis, I think Zverev has improved a lot mentally. He's a different player now than he was before. I think this matchup for him is brutal. And he has beaten Sinner 4 times before this match. And it was up 4-2 against him. And the last time they played was 7-6 in the third in Cincinnati. But when it comes to playing a Grand Slam final, and if you're facing one of the all-time greats, which I think Sinner will be one of the all-time greats, I think of it this way. Remember when Kyrgios beat Djokovic 2 times in a row, and then he faced him in the Wimbledon final? That match against Djokovic in the Wimbledon final is a different match compared to the 2 other matches where Kyrgios beat him, which I think was in Acapulco and Indian Wells. Because Djokovic is going to give his absolute best to win Wimbledon in the final. That's where he's going to find his best tennis. And very similar with Sinner. It's going to be, I'm not going to say easier, but it's going to be even more difficult to beat Sinner in a final of a Grand Slam, because it looks like he's going to be an all-time great and he's going to find his best tennis when it matters the most. So in this particular match, I just don't think Zverev is good enough to win. It's as tough as that sounds, even though he's beaten him. It's a very complicated thing to explain, but I think he's at a huge disadvantage because he has some physical limitations, as I explained in my video yesterday that I recommend that you watch. There's just not much that he can do. He tried. So while the mental game surely is something that's still maybe a question mark for Zverev, he was looking a little bit tight in that first set against Djokovic, but that, it was just the first set. Maybe he would have shaken off the nerves. And was it really a mental failure, this final? I don't know. I think it was the skills rather than the mental game that failed him. He just doesn't have the skills necessary to beat Sinner at that level. And he admitted that after the match. If you listen to what he said that I serve better than Sinner, but he does everything else better. Forehand, backhand, volleys, movement, return of serve. And on top of that, add to the fact that Sinner is going to find his best tennis when it matters the most, which he did in that second set. There wasn't much that Zverev could have done, quite honestly. I think at the French is going to be different because I think clay is Zverev's best surface. Let me take a look. Hey, coach, how do you see guys like Fonseca and Perricard performing in 2025? Any chance to win ATP 500? I am so looking forward to the Rio tournament. That's a 500 on clay in Fonseca's hometown. The crowd is going to go absolutely insane. I have a lot of friends from Brazil. One of them you guys know. That's Felipe, that was in many of my videos. He did the 10-day tennis transformation. And another guy from Brazil is Bremen, who's also in my videos. But I have many other friends from Brazil. I had a teammate from Brazil when I played college tennis. So I'm in touch with my friends from Brazil, and they're telling me that the country has such excitement for Fonseca. It's going to be a lot of pressure on him, but I think he handles the pressure well. And that tournament maybe is going to be the most important tournament for him the whole year, because if he happens to do well again, just like he did last year, I think that can boost his confidence. That can help him a lot. And to me, out of all the young players, I see him having the highest potential based on the skill set. It's the best forehand backhand combination, technically speaking, that I've seen since Djokovic and Sinner. Quite frankly, I value his forehand and backhand that high. And I've made videos on his forehand, his backhand, and his serve. The serve is good. It's not a Zverev serve or a Perricard serve, but it gets the job done. It's a spot server. He can serve fast. So the serve is definitely good. And it's, matches his game style. He can set up his baseline game with the serve. So I don't want to hype a player up. That's why I was very careful with hyping Henry Burnett up too much, because who knows what's going to happen. He's ranked, I think, 784. He's already 18. So we have to just let them play and see what happens. But Fonseca went on a roll, winning the next gen finals. He won that challenger, made it through qualies, took out Rublev, and that impressed me a lot. So I do see top 5 potential, no doubt about it. And maybe 2 years, 3 years down the road, maybe he can be in the mix with Sinner and Alcaraz. Who knows? Let's see what happens. The other question was Perricard. I am a huge Perricard fan. I love big servers. What Perricard is doing on the second serve, quite frankly, I don't think I've ever seen that before. It's absolutely insane. I made a video about the Perricard serve last year. You guys should check it out. I just love watching somebody construct service games in that way. Very entertaining. I also find his ground strokes very, very interesting. I'm in the process of analyzing his backhand and his forehand. I might or might not do a video on it. I will see. The backhand is very old school. I don't think I've seen a backhand, one-handed backhand like this on tour. Very old school. Reminiscent a little bit of Ivan Lendl. And the forehand is more next gen, but with the severely bent arm. I talked about his forehand in my top 3 fastest forehands of the Australian Open video a little bit. So let's see if I make that video or not, but I'm super excited about Perricard. He's going to be one of these players that can take out anyone when he's playing well. He can get himself into tie breaks, and just like Karlovic, just like Isner, he's going to be dangerous. If he can improve his movement, his ground strokes, he can improve, his net skills, maybe he can be a top 10 player, but we're going to have to see. Let's see how he does. But definitely incredibly dangerous, and for me, super fun to watch, because anytime Perricard is playing someone, it's that contrast of styles that's so interesting to watch. Let's take a look. Where am I located? I'm in South Florida, Palm Beach County. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, Henry Burnett. I already answered that. It's too early to say. Too early to say about him. Let's give him some time to develop. Okay, this is interesting. Hey, can you guys tell me why tennis has become so slow the last years? I can't watch it the last years anymore. Always falling asleep. Is it the balls? So that's an interesting question. The balls have definitely slowed down, no doubt about it. And the surfaces are also slower. So while guys are hitting faster now than they have before, I do think that the game was fast in the 90s because of the surfaces, and we also had some of the greatest servers of all time in that era. So the game was extremely fast, and the grass was faster, and they've slowed it down. I think Ivan Ishevich and Sampras Wimbledon finals had a lot to do with it, because a lot of people found those matches boring. There were absolutely no rallies whatsoever. Two of the greatest servers of all time. And now you could make the argument that it's the other extreme, where maybe the rallies are too long. I think it's very matchup dependent. If you have a match like Tien and Medvedev, two guys who love redirecting the ball, you can get these long rallies where it does indeed look a tad slow, and the rallies are maybe a little bit too long. And if you want to be super critical, you can say maybe a tad boring. But I feel that the best players can hit through the slow balls, like an Alcaraz, like a Sinner, Rune. We talked about Perricard, Fonseca. They can hit through those fast balls, and it's still fast to me. There was one forehand that Sinner hit in the final, third set, 5-2. Zverev served 40 love. Sinner hit this pickup forehand from the baseline and hit it inside out. It's maybe one of the fastest forehands that I've ever seen. I call it a Madison Keys forehand in my video. So, yeah, I don't perceive it that way. I still think the game looks fast to me. But yeah, there's some matchups where it does look a little bit slower. Now, I do think that it's dangerous to play with balls that fluff up and go dead very fast. I think it's bad for the players. I do think that can potentially cause problems with the arm, no doubt about it, and can cause injuries. So I think variety makes a lot of sense to me, where you maybe bring back some of the old super fast surfaces and let's see what happens. Maybe Perricard becomes unbreakable, Maybe some guys will struggle on those courts. Maybe Alcaraz is going to have a harder time on those courts. Bring back indoor carpet and make a master series on that. I feel that a variety of different balls, faster, slower, a variety of different surfaces, apart from the changes that are natural, clay, grass, and hard, you make fast chords, slow chords, and just change the game up. I think it will make the results more inconsistent. You're not going to see as much dominance as we've seen in the last 15 years, maybe, and maybe it's a good thing. So I don't know. I'm all for variety. Let's see here. Okay, you know what? Let me, guys, real quick, tell you about my racket situation, and then there's a great question here about Madison Keys. How impressed are you with Madison Keys? So let me quickly tell you guys what's going on with the rackets. So I'm not going to tell you, but there's one more play test coming either tomorrow or the day after. I'm going to post a video, and there's going to be one more play test, and then the final play test where I'm going to find a new racket. I have no idea what I'm going to choose. There has been an unfortunate development. I'm not going to get into it now, but I'm just going to tell you which rackets have made the final play test. So here we have the Yonex Persev 100. This racket was unreal. One of the best rackets that I've ever played with. I made shots that I had no business making. Off-center shots were going in. It's an absolutely phenomenal racket. Absolutely love it. And this could certainly be my next racket. I don't know. Now I have here the new Technifiber T-Fight 300 gram. I play well with this racket. Forehand was working well. Serve was working well. The feeling wasn't quite as good as with the Persev 100, but very good overall racket. And I just saw a video from Carousel. I think he switched from the 100D to a customized version of this. And I found it surprising, but he said in the video that he was looking for a little bit more power. But in my mind, this racket is like perfect for him, the way he plays. But I understand that he's looking for more power. I think, as I said in one of my videos during the US Open, we're going to see Carew in one of these Grand Slam qualies. And with the audience that he has, I think this can be incredibly exciting to watch. So I'm cheering on Carew and wish him all the best. All right, now, here we have one of the best rackets that I've ever tried in my life. The Solenko Whiteout 305 XTD. This racket is longer, 27.5, I think, 27.5 if I remember correctly. It doesn't say on here, but yeah, 27.5, I think. This racket is so good. I served so well with it. The problem is when I play with longer rackets, my forehand gets a little bit worse. On a bad day, I will spray it more because the maneuverability is worse and it's harder for me to make spin. So my serve gets better and my forehand gets worse. So it gets super tricky, but I felt like I served the best with this one out of all the rackets that I tested. So this is an absolutely phenomenal racket. This one's going to be in the final play test. And, over the last 6 months, I'm going to be honest with you guys, and I'm sure you've seen it in the videos. I've been using the Wilson Shift. When I give a lesson, when I use the racket in my videos, I use this because it just feels so good in my hand. It's a racket that suits my forehand really well because it's very maneuverable, but my serve is not the best with it. So it's, again, so hard to figure out what's best for me. But the forehand feels great. It is a phenomenal racket. I love it. And this is my go-to racket out of these four right now. It's the Wilson Shift. And like I said, there might or might not be another racket added to the list. So we're going to either have 4 or 5 rackets in the final playtest. And let's see what happens, guys. I don't know. This has been a long journey. We're going to discuss everything when the time comes, which is going to be very soon. Now, let me talk about Madison Keys. She's one of my all-time favorite players. For you guys that don't know, I love watching WTA. And to me, she was one of the best players, or maybe the best player to never win a Grand Slam. And it's so interesting how it all came together for her unexpectedly, and her draw was absolutely brutal. I thought that the Collins match was going to be tricky for her. She made it through that one. Then she beat Rybakina, who's not at the top of her game. You know, there's a lot of drama going on in her camp. Goran not part of the team anymore. But Madison took her out, and Svitolina was playing well in this tournament. Madison beat her. And then to go through Swiatek and Sabalenka back-to-back at the most important stage of the Grand Slam tournament is so impressive. I'm so happy for Madison Keys. I saw so many players were congratulating her. I think everybody was happy for her. Now, looking forward, what could easily happen is what happened to Sloane. I made a video about this, I think a couple years ago. Sloane went on an incredible losing streak after winning the US Open. If I remember correctly, it was either 6 or 8 months of losing in the first round after winning the US Open. So this is something that definitely can happen, where once you achieve your lifelong goal, that all of a sudden there's a lack of motivation. So this could definitely happen to Madison, but I hope that it won't, because she has the opportunity with almost no points to defend. She has that fourth round at Wimbledon to defend, but she has the golden opportunity to go super high in the rankings, and she's capable of going deep in any Grand Slam tournament. Even the French, she was in the semifinals in 2018. Wimbledon with that serve and that forehand, are you kidding me? The backhand looks so much better with the Yonex racket. So she can win Wimbledon. I think at the US Open, there's going to be a lot of pressure, but with the help of the crowd, she could win that too. I think this year could be the Madison Keys year. So let's see what happens. I'm a huge fan. I'm so happy for her. Yes, Andy Roddick switched to the shift. I saw that video. No, this is a live stream. I tried the Karoo racket, Technipower 305. It's this one right here. As I already said, I made a video about it, and it's a great racket. I see a lot of people are switching to this one. Emma Burgic, who you might know from my channel, she switched from the TFX1 to this one as well. So super popular racket. A lot of people are switching to it. It's a power racket, but still gives you a lot of control, and it's maneuverable. So it's kind of like an all-around racket. I would describe it that way. But go on my channel and find that video. It came out this year. Let's see what happened. Coach, would you ever play against some of these other tennis YouTubers? And do you think you'd crush them? That is a phenomenal question. So I've been talking to Winston, and he is coming to Miami for the tournament, and we're looking to set something up. I don't think he has a lot of time. He's got a pretty tight schedule when he's here, but we're looking to set up some matches. So that could definitely happen, and I'm 100% up for it. And yes, I am planning to play more matches on the Intuitive Tennis YouTube channel. I've been so busy with coaching, running this channel, running Intuitive Tennis Premium, that I haven't really played that much as of late. And also, to complicate things even more, I had this horrible problem with not having a racket. And on top of all that, there's been another problem. I'm not going to talk about it now. I'll address it in the final play test. So prior to that, though, like prior to going on this racket journey, I did play quite a bit. I was playing a lot of sets with Milan, who was my main practice partner, who you guys know from my channel. But there were a couple of other guys, guys who are in their mid-20s who just finished playing D1, who are coaching now. So I've been playing some sets with them. And I think it's super interesting to play a match and be mic'd up. I think it's so valuable. And it's a super interesting concept. It's very difficult to pull off because anytime I play mic'd up, I play a lot worse. And but I'm willing to do it despite that, because it can be very valuable. you know. Um, I can learn about my own game by being mic'd up, and also I can provide um, some helpful tips for other players. So I do plan to, once I find the racket, to start training a lot and to play a lot of matches and do matches mic'd up this year on intuitive tennis. Am I open to playing YouTubers? Yes, 100%. If Carew finds himself in Florida, if he plays a challenger, if he wants to get out of a rhythm, and if he wants to crush an old guy and beat the crap out of him, I'll be willing to do that. But it's not an invitation. I think it would be a complete waste of time for Carew. He's on tour. But there's so many interesting matches that I can play. And yes, I'm open to playing other YouTubers, no doubt about it. So let's see what happens. But first, I need a racket, and I need to start practicing again. Okay, let's see what else you guys are saying. Radix podcast is blowing up, by the way. I've been looking at the numbers of serve. I always look at YouTube numbers in the tennis niche, and Radix numbers started exploding after he did that Kyrgios video, which got over 100K. That particular one, I don't know where it's at now. It's probably a lot higher than that, but in 2 or 3 days, he collected over 1,000 comments, which is so unusual in the tennis niche. And ever since that video, his channel has been absolutely blowing up. He's doing big numbers. He's now at 1.1 million views per month, which he wasn't anywhere near that before. They were doing like 300, 400 for a long time, ever since starting the podcast. So the podcast has exploded, and I'm happy to see that. There's a lot more people watching it now. Okay, this is a technical question. Let me answer it because it's a good one. I struggle with the Continental grip since I'm used to the forehand grip, even for serves and volleys. Any drills to help me adjust? Great question. So let's take this racket here, and we'll go into a forehand grip. And what happens on the serve is that you're uncomfortable holding the racket in a Continental grip because you're going to achieve a different wrist position at the moment of contact. So what's going to happen, since you serve with a forehand grip, your wrist is going to be somewhat like this at contact. And now if I just turn my grip and I have the same wrist position, you see the racket is going to be turned towards the left. And now you're going to get accidental slices that are going to shoot way leftward on your serve when you have this. So there are certain progressions that you can do to get comfortable with this new wrist position, high-fiving the contact and so on. And I do have a beginner video with Jen where we practice this. There's a progression. You can start with your hand and then you transition into the racket. Look up that video, beginner serve lesson with Jen, and you got to get rid of it. That is one of the worst habits to have, is serving with a forehand grip. Your serve might get a little bit better, but you're going to plateau very fast, and you're not going to be able to properly develop your serve. So you absolutely have to get rid of the forehand grip on the serve. And if you happen to hit a forehand with a Continental grip, you got to change it to at least Eastern. Continental grip on the forehand, no good for the modern game. And the only time I'd be okay with a Continental grip on the forehand if somebody's been playing tennis for 30, 40 years and they have a good forehand, they hit it well, and it's tough for them because of the muscle memory to change. I would say, okay, go ahead and just keep playing with the Continental grip. But 99% of the time, it's worth making the effort, the painful effort to change to an Eastern grip or a semi-Western, which is going to give you huge advantages as far as your wrist position at the moment of contact. So you got to change that. For the backhand, one hand that you want Eastern and two hand that you want Continental with your right hand. Let's see. What racket do you suggest 10-year-old kid transition to adult racket? As I said in many of my videos, I can't really give you specific recommendations regarding rackets, just general guidelines. And a 10-year-old, I don't have enough information there. I also can't give you an advice. Sometimes 10 years old, you might want to continue playing with the junior racket, or if you transition to a very light one. Like for example, if you have a Babolat, you go to a Aero Light that I think is like maybe 260 static weight or 270 static weight. And that can be comfortable for a 10-year-old. Make sure the grip size is small, that they can grip their hand properly around the racket. But yeah, be careful. I mean, some kids that started very young, they can transition to an adult racket, but it just depends on the circumstance. I can't really give any specific advice there. Keys playing at high level, very tough to beat. I agree. I think she is so dangerous. Do you think Shamir could beat Winston? So yes, this is one of the suggestions that I've made to Winston, and he was worried about not having enough time to pull this off, but I suggested that I play Winston and that he also play Shamir. Okay, here's the thing. You guys noticed that Shamir has not been on the channel for a while, and he was on the channel a lot in 2024. So he has another injury. He was dealing with a foot problem. He was out of the game for 2 years because of it. And now he's developed a shoulder problem. He has a shoulder pain right here, and he can't really hit forehands that well and serves. So he hasn't really been playing in the last 2 months, but he's eager to come back. And Shamir, at his absolute best level, would lose to Winston. Winston, to me, is such a good player. He has such a good forehand. You know, a lot of people call him 4-0. He's a solid 4-5 to me. Solid. Maybe in some states, you know, where there's a shortage of good 5-0s, he could even be considered a 5-0. I know in California, no, it's different. It's very strong level there. Maybe to some extent here in Southeast Florida too, but very strong player. I don't see much of a chance for Shamir. Winston's too steady, and the forehand is very heavy, and he's going to be able to spread the ball, and he's going to put Shamir in a lot of trouble. So, no, I don't think so. And also, one thing about Winston that helps him is playing all these matches. He's very match tough, and he plays a lot of good opponents, where Shamir, because of the injuries, he hasn't practiced at all. He hasn't really played any matches. But the frustrating thing is that in 2024, starting in January to maybe October, he was playing a lot and playing tournaments, and he even won a 4.0 tournament in Orlando. He was doing so great. And he's practicing with Carla, who you know from my channel as well. So it's just an unfortunate thing, but hopefully the shoulder is going to heal and he gets back out there, and we're going to make some more videos, but we'll have to see. Is it normal to experience bicep pain from two-handed backhand? No, absolutely not. That's weird. I never had bicep pain, and in all these years coaching, I never heard a student complain about bicep pain. So it's probably stemming from something else. See, one thing that I do notice with a lot of the people that I coach, remotely or on the court, is that a lot of people now, a lot of guys especially, are obsessed with lifting weights. And lifting weights is not good for the game of tennis. Yes, you can lift weights, but you have to lift them very specifically. If you're lifting heavy, there are certain exercises that are going to be okay. Maybe if you're squatting, maybe even bench press is going to be okay to some extent. But if you're doing heavy bicep curls, and then you wonder why your bicep hurts when you're playing tennis, or why it feels so stiff and tight when you're playing, you don't need that for tennis. There are some guys with bicep muscles on tour, but most players, look at Jannik Sinner, look at Zverev, Australian Open final, you see huge biceps. I don't. So if you want to get better at tennis, I would sacrifice the gym work or specify the gym work to help your game. So I would look there for a solution with your bicep pain. This is a great question. So many strings are on the market. Have you considered to stop using Kirschbaum Orange when you will choose a new racket? That is so interesting. Yes. Okay, let me tell you something. So this racket right here, the Wilson Shift, the Kirschbaum Super Smash Orange works really well on my old Pure Drive Plus. It's my favorite string right now. There are other strings that I like, so I'm somewhat flexible on strings. There are maybe 5 strings that I can play with, but I would say this is my favorite one. But I did notice that with this particular string on this racket, it feels different. It doesn't feel the same. And I've tried different tensions, so I do think that you could have a scenario where you have your favorite string and it feels great on one racket. You put it in another racket, all of a sudden starts feeling different. Not necessarily because of the racket, but that particular string in another racket. It's hard to explain, but there's something to it. And yes, I'm definitely open to playing with a different string once I select my new racket. I have to see, how the Kirschbaum Super Smash behaves. I would love to go back to my old Polystar Classic. I still have a 400-meter roll. That is my favorite string of all time. I used that string for 15 years. And that's a great example of a string that I used my whole life. I used it in Hyper Hammer 5.2 for like, I don't know, 15 years. Put it in that Pure Drive Plus, 2015 Pure Drive Plus when I first switched, and that string just didn't work. I tried so many different tensions. I even tried different gauges on the Polystar. It just didn't work, and that's when I was forced to switch strings. It was right then when I switched from the Hyper Hammer 5.2 to the Pure Drive. So that could happen again. We'll have to see. I'll keep you guys posted for sure. Okay, this is an interesting one. I think in regard to Winston being called a 4-0, this just proves so many people do not film themselves playing. People only watch pros, so they think anything below that level is bad. Okay, let me take a sip of Topo Chico before I answer that. This is best water ever. I drink sparkling water since I grew up in Germany. No flat water for me. And Topo Chico, Mexican water, fantastic. Very, very good. I'm not sponsored, but I'm currently looking for a sponsor for the channel. I think this goes back to 2018, if you can believe it, or 2019, when I posted a point play session with my student Dave, who is one of these guys that's a gamer. He doesn't have a good technique, and he's one of these guys that he takes lessons, but he takes a half-hour lesson once every 2 weeks. Like, he's one of these guys that's not going to put in a lot of effort into changing technique. He just loves playing matches. Of course, he wants to get better, but he's not willing to put in enough time off the match court and do reps to change his technique. And nothing wrong with it. Everybody has their own preferences, but because of that, his technique is not that great, but he makes it work because, like I said, he's a gamer. He's one of these guys that has an incredible positive attitude on the court. He runs everything down, even though he's not the fittest guy. And he just makes every ball. He dinks shots. He can spin them in. He's got a pretty big first serve, like a super slow second serve. Huge discrepancy between first and second serve. And he beats a ton of guys. And he's been playing for a long time on a 4.0 league here in Southeast Florida. So when I make my videos, what would be the point of me making up a rating? I just, on camera, usually ask the person that's my student or that's featured in a match of mine, what's your rating? And they'll say their rating. And that particular video, you can go back to it. Dave got so many comments. I got letters in my email, these huge letters, huge paragraphs of people begging me to take down this video from my channel because supposedly I put 4-0 in the title and this guy was like a 3-0. That's what they were claiming. So while there's certainly differences in like a 4-0 maybe in California versus another state, there's differences between a 4-0 who's like 55 years old and a 4-0 that's 25 years old. I do think that people see somebody on YouTube, they look at it, and to them it looks bad. And I understand that it looks bad because when I look at myself playing, I'm not too pleased with what I'm seeing. It looks terrible, okay? And pretty much everyone that I talk to has the same experience. When you see yourself playing, it looks worse. So the camera makes you look worse. It makes you look slower. It makes your strokes look slower. And it's basically what it is. Another example I can give you from maybe 2020, a long time ago, another student of mine who played junior tennis here in Florida. He's one of these kids that played tournaments and had a ranking. He actually played against Opelka at one of these tournaments in Boca. He ended up playing D3 college tennis and was a nice player. Now, he wasn't anywhere near being able to play D1, no doubt about that, but he was still a nice player. And he was for sure a 5.0. Now, Evan, very similar to Dave, had quirky technique. He had one of these like topspin forehands that were very spinny. He had one of those Nick Kyrgios style backhands where he liked to bunt the ball back. And he had a kick serve that he used on the first serve, and he liked to come to the net a lot. So the game was quirky. And again, I put the match with him on the channel, and I was forced to, make a pinned comment to explain the level of this player and explain why he indeed is a 5-0 and why you might think that he is not a 5-0 and that you should be nice and not troll. So I made efforts early when I started, posting on YouTube to clarify and explain to people that there's absolutely nothing to gain of any one of us that post matches on YouTube to increase our level and say that we're a 4-0 if we're indeed a 3-5. What would be the point of that? And so since that, I've actually often, if the player wasn't sure whether they're, 4-0 or 4-5, I would take the lower rating just to protect them. So somebody played on a 4-5 league, but they were like, I'm kind of in between. I would always say 4-0 just to protect them. And so, yeah, that's definitely a thing on the internet, and it goes deeper than that. Yeah, I don't want to get into this because this goes back to 2022 with the whole Beat the Pro saga. I'm not going to even touch that subject, but yeah, it's one of these things that's frustrating, but it is what it is. I accept it now, and I don't think I can make any change. It is what it is. People are always going to write that the player featured is not the rating that the player claims he or she is. And I have a couple of videos coming up that are great. I plan to feature a lot of matches in 2025. I have one video already up, Emma versus a 4.0. It's on the Intuitive Tennis Premium. That's going to come out very soon. And then I have another one, Emma versus 4-5. That one's not done yet. I haven't finished editing that one yet. And then I'm going to make Emma versus 5-0. And then Emma versus 5-5 and up. So there's going to be a lot of match play. Like I said in the beginning, I'm going to try to play and we'll see what happens. All right, let me see here. Let's see. Grüße aus Deutschland und danke für dein klasse Kanal. Vielen Dank. Oh, this is a great question. Do you think Casper will ever win Roland Garros? I'll take a sip of the Topo Chico to answer this one because that's such a tough question. It's highly likely that we'll have a scenario where, for whatever reason, Alcaraz, Djokovic, Sinner don't find themselves in the semis, let's say. Draw completely opens up. It could happen, right? Anything can happen theoretically. And in that circumstance, it's going to be a huge opportunity for so many guys to win a slam. Zverev, Ruud, so many other ones. So yeah, I do think it can happen. But who would have thought that after we've seen the dominance from the big three, that where, these guys made semis or finals pretty much at every Grand Slam for so many years, that now we have the same thing. It's unbelievable. I really thought we were going to be in a slump like the one we were in between Sampras and Federer. I thought it was going to be like that. A lot of different Grand Slam champions, different number ones that weren't going to hold number one for very long. I thought that we were going to get that, back in like 21. But who would have thought that we have, two players of the same caliber as the big three, that are going to go deep. Last year, they split the slams. I don't want to make predictions now about the French. We have to wait for the clay court season, but, it's highly likely that you're going to see Sinner and Alcaraz deep in slams for the rest of the year and many years to come. So, yeah, Ruud can win, but if he has to go through two of these guys, I don't see it happening. It's going to be very tough. Okay, this one's interesting. Let's see. I have to wait for it to pop. Oh, here. People have the narrative that Zverev Medi group are not strong gen and they benefit from the big three being older and Sinner Carlos being too young, not to mention the Fonseca group. Look, as I said in my video yesterday after the final, as I said earlier in this video, it's hard to make these comparisons because the caliber of play from Sinner and Alcaraz is very close or maybe equal to the caliber of play from the big three. You cannot say that the caliber of play from Medvedev and Zverev is quite that high. It certainly is high enough where both Zverev and Medvedev can beat these guys, but it's not quite that high. So it's just unbelievable that Sinner is so good, that Alcaraz is so good. And very unfortunate for a guy like Zverev. I mean, can you imagine this guy? He was part of the big three era and he was doing well there. And maybe he thought, these guys retire. I'm going to slide in. I'm going to take some slam titles. No. All of a sudden, you have two other guys that are unbelievably good, close or equal to the level of the big three. Who would have thought? But it is what it is. ATX Super Dave, I'm not ignoring your comments. I'm not seeing your comments. Why don't you write down what you're asking? Oh, this is interesting here. Nick Roddick recently talked about how Shelton needs to work on his fastball serve. I think this might be the case for forehands as well. Do you think that players now play with too much spin? That is a super interesting question. I agree with Roddick 100%. And I said that in my analysis prior to Shelton Sinner semifinal. I don't think Shelton brings the heat enough, especially on his second serve. But even on his first serve, he suffers from too much options on the serve and too much variety. He has an excellent kick serve, but that serve is not going to be as effective as a lefty, as I explained in that video. And if he's able to bring the heat and serve like 240, why not do that more consistently? Like, yeah, your percentage is going to drop a little bit, but who can return 240 if it's placed well? No one. So Shelton's serve stats are good. Don't get me wrong. I studied them in this Australian Open. I studied 2024 serve stats. I studied the serve stats during the Australian Open, and he didn't serve well the entire tournament. And he could be serving a lot better. I think the slice serve, to me, is not as good as it could be. The biggest advantage of lefties is being able to slice to righties. And his slice serve doesn't curve as much as some of the great slice serves of the past, like, for example, McEnroe or Ivanisevic. So I think Shelton, he is one of the best servers in the world. I think he could be even better at serving. So yeah, I agree with Roddick. Now, the other part of that question is whether there's now too much spin on the ATP Tour. No, that's a ubiquitous element of the forehand, for example, the topspin swing path. And I studied technique, even prior to making the YouTube channel. And back in those days, you'd see that there's a big discrepancy between the ATP forehand and the WTA forehand regarding the swing path. So the ATP forehand had a swing path where the tip of the racket came over this way, and WTA forehand, most of them, had a swing path where the racket went up, but the tip of the racket came through. Now, this particular forehand you did see on the ATP Tour back in the 90s quite a bit, and you still see it here and there, but 99.99% of ATP forehands, especially the very best ones, all have that topspin swing path where the racket goes vertically like this. Imagine a diagonal line in front of my racket, it goes up like that. And that is necessary on tour, because when you hit at that pace, and if you have more of a flat topspin swing path, like you saw on the WTA Tour back in the day, and you hit at that pace and you have that much pace coming at you and that much heaviness, you're going to make more mistakes. So no, there's not too much spin on the ATP Tour. Now, if you're talking about somebody like hitting the ball thin, I don't really see that. That's like a topspin forehand with no penetration. You don't see that. You see a heavy spin forehand. And I think last year, Fils had the heaviest forehand on tour. So no, that's something that you see across the board. Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, Sinner, Alcaraz, the best of the best forehands. They all have heavy spin. Backhand, a little different. One-handed backhand, it's heavy. Two-handed backhand, it more flat. It's a flat topspin. Some have a little bit more heavy topspin. Like Sinner's backhand is more heavy topspin. Is higher spin rate compared to the tour average on Sinner's backhand, for example. On the WTA Tour, what I've been seeing is that now more and more players have a topspin forehand swing path on the WTA Tour as well. So this is the best way to hit a forehand, and it's the right way. It's the right way to hit the forehand. And no, it's not wrong. So let's see what else we got here. Okay, let's see. Okay, here's ATX Super Dave. Oh, okay. What does training for playing more competitive tennis look like for you? Interesting question. So, for you guys that don't know, I have a bad knee problem. See, I stopped playing competitive tennis right after college. I started teaching full time. My first teaching job was in Rockford, Illinois. and I completely stopped playing for a couple of years. But then when I moved to Hawaii for another teaching job, my boss back then, Tim DiDonato, big shout out, I was the director of tennis at the Kohala Coast on the Big Island, and he ran 2 tournaments. He ran a Challenger, the Waikoloa Challenger, and he ran a Futures. And he organized a wildcard tournament for the Futures, and just for fun, because it was at the club next door, I signed up, ended up winning that wildcard tournament, and that reignited my passion for the game of tennis. And then I continued to play in Hawaii quite a bit. And then when I came to Florida, I played for about 10 years. I played 2 tournaments a month, sometimes more. I played everything. I played men's open. I played men's 30s. Then when I got a little bit older, I started playing men's 35s. I played everything. And there was one match. I couldn't tell you the year exactly, but it was the men's open nationals at the Jimmy Everett Tennis Center in Lauderdale. And it was in the first round, I think, against a guy from Gulf Coast University, I think. And it was in the third set, and I did something to my knee on an open stance backhand. And then I went to pick up a ball, and my knee just buckled. And then I stupidly continued to play that match, which I won. Came back the next day. Okay, I'm not gonna say this publicly, but I played against someone that has a famous daughter now, one of the best players in the world. But whatever, I'm gonna leave the names out. I won that round on one leg, basically. I couldn't move at all, and I don't even know why I did that, but I still won that second round. And then I had to pull out the third round because I couldn't walk, and that was pretty much the last time I played competitive tennis. And this is going back like 10 years at least. And I let that heal up. I did go to doctors and stuff, and I have some torn ligaments there, and they recommended that I don't do surgery as long as I can walk and run pain-free, which is definitely the case. Once that kind of healed up and the inflammation went down, I'm able to, be pain-free in everyday life. And I can play, but there are certain movements that I have a complete mental block. And some of you guys are so observant when you watch me play, you notice that I can't really move to my left side. And I have very careful movements towards that side. And so anytime I have to move to the left and then plant my left leg, open stance backhand, I'm scared. So there's a mental block there, so I can't really move freely. So for that reason, to answer your question, my training is always specific to me not hurting myself. So I will do a lot of stationary bike. I think it's good for my knee to keep the muscles around the knee strong. I will do lunges. I'll do squats. I just want to keep my legs as strong as possible because they've gotten a lot weaker over the years. I think one thing about playing competitive tennis is it keeps your legs strong. You don't even notice it half of the time. You play a match and you're fighting so hard, you're using your legs so much. And when you stop doing that, the leg muscles atrophy a little bit. And, it's hard to make up that specific musculature in the gym because the musculature is very specific to you playing tennis. So I do have some muscle atrophy, but I do try to keep my legs as strong as possible. So I do a lot of gym work. And then, of course, getting in shape for me, I can't stand just hitting. I can't stand it. It's a complete waste of time for me. I need to play points. I need to play sets. I get absolutely nothing from just hitting other than warming up. So it's all about, for me, just playing as many sets as possible, and finding solutions in those sets to improve my game. So that's what it looks like for me. It's a combination of gym, leg work, like lunges and stuff like that. And then playing as many points as possible against many different opponents. So, yeah. And guys, it's getting kind of dark over here. I'm gonna log off here real quick I think we've been doing it for over an hour, but like I said, we're gonna do more of these. Okay, we're gonna do more live streams in 2025. But I want to show you something real quick, guys. Hold on. I want to introduce you to someone. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. Hold on. Hold on 1 second. I want to introduce you to someone. All right. All right. He's scared a little bit, but this is. Okay, you stay. Huh? Cigarette? Yes, I'm live. Okay, he's trying to go away. My mom is getting something here. But anyways, this is my. Okay, he's scared. He doesn't want to be on camera. But anyway, that's my cat, and he is a Maine Coon. So, I'm probably like, oops, no mic. That was my cat, and he's a Maine Coon, and he's named after a tennis player, Gilles Simon. So his name is Simon, and I love animals. I've had dogs my whole life, and yeah, I became a cat owner a little bit later, and I like cats a lot too. But hold on, let me grab the iPad here. Let me try to answer something else. Yeah, he's a big cat. Let's see here. One more question, guys. I'm gonna log off. Okay, this is a super interesting question. Yeah, what can one do against Sinner on hard court? I mean, it's so tough. I saw a clip of Sinner hitting during the Australian Open, and it was indoors, and it was one of these shots recorded right behind him. And also, what I heard other players say about Sinner is that his ball is fast, but it's also heavy. And so, what happens to players is because it's heavy and fast, you end up panicking. And what Medvedev said about Sinner was that back in the day, he was playing somewhat similarly, but he would miss and he would go through more ups and downs in his game. But now it's so consistent, it's so controlled. He doesn't miss. And other guys panic and they start bailing out of rallies. And also, because the shot speed is so high, they're forced to increase their shot speed. For example, Djokovic, if you watch those matches closely, the last few that he lost, Novak made uncharacteristic errors because Novak has to go out of his comfort zone to match the shot speed of Sinner. So it's an absolute nightmare on hard court. On top of that, Sinner serving well, he's returning well, he's moving well, his feel is getting better, he's utilizing the drop shot, he's hitting better volleys. It's very difficult to beat him on the hard courts. All right, guys. You know what? I'm gonna close this off right here. But it was fun. I see we had like a couple hundred people in here. We're gonna do more of these. And yeah, let's do this maybe once a month or so. We're gonna go live. But now it's getting dark, and I kind of lost my groove with my mom coming here and my cat kind of like freaking out over here on camera. But anyway, it's good to talk to you guys, and I will see you soon. Look out for the next play test coming out probably Wednesday, and then there's going to be a lot of great videos coming, guys. So I'll see you soon, okay?